A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. At that time, Jesus exclaimed, "I give praise to you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth. For although you have hidden these things from the wise and the learned, you have revealed them to little ones. Yes, Father, such has been your will. All things have been handed over to me by my Father. No one knows the Son except the Father, and no one knows the Father except the Son, and anyone to whom the Son wishes to reveal him. Come to me, all you who labor and are burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon me and learn from me, for I am meek and humble of heart, and you yourselves will find rest. For my yoke is easy and my burden light." The Gospel of the Lord. There was a convocation of 3,000 Catholics in Orlando, Florida, 2 weeks ago. It was composed of bishops, priests, religious, but mainly lay people. And the purpose of the convocation was to discuss the future of the Church in the United States. Those assembled were told that for every person who is baptized Catholic in the United States today, 6 people leave the Church. There are now more former Catholics in the United States than there are Catholics. They were told that there were 4 reasons that this exodus is happening. 2 are the fault of the Church, 2 extraneous to the Church. The first is the abuse scandal. They were told that not only did those men who committed those heinous acts destroy the lives of innocent children, but they put a knife right into the heart of the Church. And we will pay for that for another 50 to 75 years. The second reason they were told for the defections is up until Pope Francis became Pope, we had a period of about 40 years where we had a very doctrinal, dogmatic church. There was no room for discussion, there was no room for questioning, no room for dissent. And when you have a dogmatic church, it pushes people to the peripheries, to the margins. It did that with divorced and remarried, gay people, etc., etc. And many people today, most particularly young people, do not marginalize people. Many of them, when they would hear that rhetoric coming from the Church, would say, wait a minute, I know good people whose marriages failed, they're in second marriages, and they have a good relationship, and they don't belong out here on the margins. Or I have friends who are gay, and they don't belong out here. And so they walk away. The third reason given is a growing secularism in Western society. There are now 31 million former Catholics in the United States of America. These are not Catholics who no longer come to Mass, but only come on occasion. These are people who say, I was born and raised Catholic, and I want nothing to do with that church any longer. And the fourth reason given was that there is a narcissism that is growing in Western society, which says that my freedom gives me self-determination. In other words, I will determine who I am, what my responsibilities are, and what I do. It is void of objective reality that ultimately there is right and there is wrong, with a massive gray area in between. Cardinal Newman, the famous British cardinal of the late 19th century, said that a river gets its force from its borders, its boundaries. But he said if you take away those boundaries, then the river overflows and ultimately becomes a lake. And because there's no movement of water, the lake ultimately becomes tepid, begins to stink, and it's no good for anything. And he used that analogy if we do away with objective reality, that ultimately, like the river, we will become tepid and begin to stink. What is my reaction to those 4 reasons? First of all, I think that the leadership of the American Church has to take off its rose-colored glasses. They seem to think that if we can fill the seminaries, everything will be fine. That's not going to happen, and that's not where the crisis is. And finally, my reaction when I reflect on this and pray over it is one of great faith, because God has never abandoned his people, and he's not abandoning us. He is doing something that is beyond the scope of any of our imagining, and our response is simply to trust him. Remember that the church at Jerusalem had to die before the church in Rome could be born. And maybe the church as we've known it has to die so that something new can be born and new life emerge. It's a moment of faith and a moment of hope. Amen.